The content of this video is strictly informational and based on historical facts and verifiable sources. It is not intended to challenge or offend anyone's beliefs, values, or personal convictions. Our sole purpose is to present alternative perspectives and accounts from history, without personal opinions or judgments. Thank you for watching with an open mind and a curious spirit.
The Bible, the most read book in human history. Billions of copies printed, countless sermons preached, wars fought, kingdoms built, and civilizations shaped by its words. But what if I told you that the Bible we know today is incomplete? Hidden within history lie books, gospels, and revelations deliberately left out, silenced, or destroyed. Welcome to the forbidden side of Scripture. Our story begins not with divine revelation, but with politics. In 325, Emperor Constantine convened the Council of Nicaea. This was not merely a gathering of faith, it was a meeting of power. The Church needed unity, and unity required control. Of the dozens of writings about Jesus circulating at the time, only 4 were chosen: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. The rest declared heresy, buried, burned. According to the testimony of Eusebius, a church historian, we have decided what books are inspired and what are not. The others are cast aside to be forgotten. But what were these other writings? And why did they terrify the early church so much? Let us begin with one of the most enigmatic discoveries of modern times: the Gospel of Thomas. The kingdom is inside of you, and it is outside of you. When you come to know yourselves, then you will be known. Unlike the familiar Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, Thomas contained no stories of miracles, no accounts of crucifixion, no resurrection. Instead, it was a collection of 114 sayings attributed to Jesus' teachings that felt closer to wisdom literature than to church doctrine. This was revolutionary. No priests, no temples, no hierarchy. Salvation, according to Thomas, was not granted by an institution. It was discovered within. Imagine the danger this posed to the early church. A religion built on authority and ritual could not tolerate the idea that every individual carried within them the spark of the divine. If you did not need the church would lose its power. And yet, these words were not isolated. Other texts from Nag Hammadi spoke in similar tones, challenging the monopoly of interpretation held by bishops. The Gospel of Philip hinted at secret teachings about marriage and spiritual union. The Apocryphon of John described visions of creation that contradicted Genesis itself. But among these voices, one figure stands out. Not a text, but a person. A disciple whose name still echoes with controversy. Mary Magdalene. And to understand her story, we must turn to another gospel. One long hidden, long denied. The Gospel of Mary. For centuries, the Church portrayed her as a sinner, a temptress, a footnote in the life of Jesus. Yet, hidden texts suggest something far more radical. Mary Magdalene, as the closest disciple, perhaps even a spiritual successor. The Gospel of Mary, discovered among the Berlin Codex fragments in the late 19th century, paints a strikingly different picture. Here, Peter asks Mary, "Sister, we know that the Savior loved you more than the rest of women. Tell us the words of the Savior, which you remember, those you know, and we do not." Mary answers not as a passive follower, but as a teacher. She interprets visions, comforts the disciples, and challenges Peter himself. The text suggests she held authority among the apostles, a role unimaginable to a patriarchal church determined to maintain male dominance. Consider the implications. If Jesus' closest confidant was a woman, speaking with authority, guiding decisions, what does this reveal about early Christianity? Why was her voice minimized, her influence erased? The Church, fearing the destabilization of its hierarchical structure, relegated Mary to obscurity. Her role was excised from official accounts, leaving her as an enigmatic figure, known mainly for her sin rather than her wisdom. And yet, the fragments remain testimonies of a different narrative, of a Christianity where women could lead, interpret, and teach. The question lingers: what else has been hidden, silenced, or altered to preserve authority? While the New Testament tells one story, there are ancient texts that never made it into the canon texts that were read, revered, and sometimes feared by early Jewish and Christian communities. Among them, The Book of Enoch, attributed to the great-grandfather of Noah, offers a vision of the cosmos, angels, and divine judgment that the canonical texts only hint at. Written between the 3rd century BCE and the 1st century CE, it describes the Watcher's angels who descended to earth, taught humans forbidden knowledge, and committed sins that corrupted mankind. And they took wives for themselves, and everyone chose for himself one. And they began to go in unto them, and to defile themselves with them. This is a story of divine beings defying heavenly order, introducing knowledge and corruption simultaneously, a narrative that challenges traditional interpretations of sin and divine justice. Similarly, the Book of Jubilees, sometimes called the Lesser Genesis, retells biblical history with emphasis on angelic intervention, laws, and observances that were considered too radical or detailed for inclusion in the canonical Bible. These texts were not merely historical curiosities. They posed theological dilemmas. They questioned human agency, divine justice, and the hidden workings of God's plan. Could the early church risk including these narratives, where authority was challenged and mysteries were revealed that didn't align with the emerging institutional control? And yet, these books survived in fragments, in translations, hidden in monasteries, or preserved in the traditions of the Ethiopian Church. They hint at a richer, more complex spiritual landscape than the official Bible suggests. As we move from the suppressed Gospels of the New Testament to these hidden books of the Old Testament, a pattern emerges. Knowledge is dangerous. Truth is often filtered, and power dictates what we see, read, and believe. Between the Old and New Testaments lie forgotten texts, the Apocrypha. Stories like Tobit or Judith speak of faith, trials, and courage, but also reveal struggles over morality and justice. The Apocrypha opens a world where the divine interacts with the human, and the boundaries of what was considered sacred were still blurred. This mosaic continues with the Dead Sea Scrolls, discovered in Qumran between 1947 and 1956. Preserved for over 2 millennia, these scrolls contain fragments of nearly the entire Hebrew Bible, along with sectarian rules, hymns, and visions. They reveal that contemporary to Jesus, vastly different visions of salvation, purity, and hope coexisted. Early Christian communities were far from uniform. The Ebionites saw Jesus as a human prophet, while the Gnostics sought salvation through secret knowledge. Early Christianity was a battlefield of ideas, debating what should be preserved and how to interpret the Master's words. The canonization of the Bible consolidated certain voices while silencing others. Councils like Laodicea, Hippo, and Carthage defined the New Testament canon. Texts like the Gospel of Peter or Acts of Paul and Thecla were excluded, even though they held spiritual value. examining censored passages, such as 1 Corinthians 11 to 5 to 6 on female leadership, or the Levite's concubine, we see how human editing filtered the narrative. Even Jesus' interactions with women like Mary Magdalene were obscured, limiting alternative perspectives. Among the forgotten Gospels, the Gospel of Judas, discovered in the 70s near El-Minya, Egypt, presents Judas not as a traitor, but as fulfilling a divine plan. You will surpass them all, for you will sacrifice the man who saw me. The Gospel of Philip, another Nag Hammadi text, suggests intimate relationships between Jesus and his disciples, including Mary Magdalene. The childhood of Thomas was excluded for challenging the image of a perfect Christ. Through the centuries, the Bible has been presented as absolute truth, a sacred and unquestionable guide. Yet, what we've uncovered reveals a far more human story, a darker side, shaped by disputes, politics, and silenced voices. The forgotten Gospels, the forbidden writings, the censored passages, they remind us that early Christianity was an ocean of ideas, far more vast and diverse than the official story ever allowed us to see. And so, the great question rises: what would our world look like today if those ideals, those texts, those visions had survived the march of time? Perhaps our beliefs would be different. Perhaps our values, our societies, even our very understanding of the divine would not be what they are now. The legacy we know is only part of the story. The other part, the hidden one, still whispers from the shadows. And now, the doubt rests in your hands. What is the Bible truly? Eternal word of the divine, or the echo of human choices that forever altered the destiny of faith?